So yeah, out of 10, my overall rating for Eye of the World was a 9.2, which for me is
Wow.
very high. Yeah.
Very high score.
Yeah.
I'm gonna seem like the Wheel of Time hater now.
Yeah. What do you got?
My original score for Eye of the World, on the old rating system is a 6.85 out
Holy
of 10.
shit. Richard. I don't remember it being that low. So I think the last character I want to at least highlight before we move on to plot is Tom
Mhm.
Maryland. Because I don't know what I was on I completely forgot that Tom was in the first book somehow. Even though a lot of these big plot points have Tom integrally involved.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't. I'm like, I was reading. I'm like, at the beginning, they're like talking about, oh, we hired a gleeman for the festival, and I'm like, interesting. Like, I wonder what gleeman that is. It can't be Tom yet. And then it's like Tom. I'm like, I didn't know Tom was in the first. Like, I don't know what I was
He was
on, but it
he
was
was
like,
there from the beginning.
yeah, I was like
He was with
re-surprised.
them the
Yeah.
entire time.
All right, what is up, you guys?
Alri
Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video, another review for Wheel of Time, and I'm visited by my friend Richard, and I'll let him introduce himself here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Richard. I'm from the 2toRamble, podcast, and Austin has betrayed me. He
Hmm.
doesn't like Wheel of Time, so I found a new best friend Wheel of Time fan in
Yeah,
Daniel. It's gonna be fun. We're
I know.
starting off our journey here on book 1.
Yeah, love the sound of the best friend. That's fun. um, but yeah, Wheel of Time book one. Obviously, we've done one video already, kind of just talking about why we love the series in general. And then this is my first time rereading the series because I actually finished the series beginning of January this year. And it was actually fun. I was looking at my Goodreads when I first read Eye of the World, and I actually finished it 2 years ago, or started it 2 years ago to the day that I finished it, just a couple like just last week. So I just think that's kind of fun. Exactly two
That's the
years.
right time. As soon
Yeah,
as you finish it, you start it again. Just keep
exactly.
it going.
Yeah, exactly. It always like whenever I hear about people rereading like something every year, I always think of Christopher Lee
Mhm.
saying that he would reread Lord of the Rings at least once every single year.
It
Which is
makes
fun.
sense.
So it's just classic. With Wheel of Time, it's a little harder to do that because they're
A little bit
freaking
more.
chonkers and there's so many of them. But honestly, if you have like one a month, I feel like you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, I've not upped my TBR,
Hmm.
reading speed to be
Hmm.
able to handle every year
Hmm.
Wheel of Time, but I am excited of this reread. So I've already started my reread.
Hmm.
I've read up to book 4 of so I've read it for a second time. I'll be refreshing myself, and after that, I'll be continuing on with you
Hmm.
and rereading them same time as you.
Hmm. And don't worry, everybody. I'm trying to go as fast as I can. I am actually impressed with myself that I managed Eye of the World in like 2.5 weeks. I think on my first
That's
time
impressive.
rereading, or not rereading, the first time reading it, I was kind of like jumping back into reading as a full time hobby. And I think it took me literally like 6 or 7 weeks. So the fact that I go from 6 to 7 weeks to like 2.5, I feel like I'm doing good. So to all
Oh,
you
no, it's
people,
impressive.
yeah. So all you people very excited to see Richard's takes on book five and future, like I am, just please be patient. I appreciate you.
Gonna have to wait it out.
Yeah. So I know it's been a few months since you've reread it. But I guess what are some things that you were most excited about before we kind of jump into the whole rating system
Mhm.
upon the reread?
Sure. Big things I was most excited for on the reread was trying to catch all of the little references and little Easter eggs that are paid off, like
Mm-hmm.
by book 10 through 14,
Mm-hmm.
kind of things. That I am very impressed with Robert Jordan's ability to do that. Part of it is I wonder, did he lay the seeds and didn't know where they were going to go, but he knew enough to be able to say, "Hey, I'm going to put something here
Mm-hmm.
and we'll see where that goes," or did he have all of this planned out from the very beginning? I
Right.
kind of lean on the first part,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some stuff that was clearly planned from day one
Mm-hmm.
that shocked me that I didn't see it coming sooner.
Yeah. Well, and then there's some things like towards the end of book one, I feel that maybe he just kind of threw in for convenience sake because like the Green Man, for example, I forgot he existed, and then on the reread, I'm
Yeah.
like, there he is, and then never hear him or see or hear from him again. Um, so just like little things like that. I think like just the not the controversy, but the whole story of how book one came out, with him not knowing if he would continue the series with book deals or whatever. I understand that, but it's just like there's some little details like that where it's like doesn't pay off or pays off
Yeah.
in its own little story in book one. So
No, book 1 definitely has the most arguably the most room for improvement,
hmm
and it disappoints me that that's what I was kinda looking forward to with the show
hmm
of, "Hey, there's room to change here. You don't have to keep it the same. You can
right.
change some things, and I think people will be happy." And then they did, and I was not happy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
oh
haven't
well.
watched it just because I've heard about the train wreck that it is, at least from book fans. Like
Yeah,
I guess season one
even not
spoilers
book
because I don't
I
care, but like Perrin having a
yeah.
wife right off the get go and like murdering
Yeah.
her immediately, like that doesn't make any sense for the character of Perrin.
Thing is, it could. So
hmm
book 1, and bringing it back to here,
Yeah.
Perrin is really well set up as a character for he's the gentle giant. He's
hmm
afraid of his strength,
hmm
and, you know, he's very cognizant of his size and strength, and he's afraid of imposing that on others, and so he's very slow to thinking, but he's not stupid.
hmm
And so it's a really I like that character, especially set up well in book 1. That's where the show actually has an event. Like, I could see him accidentally killing his wife in a fit of rage could fit into his character.
hmm
It's just what they do later on in the show that kind of
That's fair.
ruins that.
Again, I haven't watched it, so I just basically what I've seen
Don't bother.
on the like the subreddits, whatever. So
Yeah.
that's fair. I guess I should mention this too, that there's going to be spoilers in this in this video for book one. If you haven't
Yeah.
assumed that,
I
I'm
I will do my best,
mhm,
though there
for
may be a
future.
couple times where I
Yeah,
want to spoil something that,
hmm
"Hey, I caught this Easter egg
yeah,
that is paid off in a later book." So it's kind of a spoiler,
I
but
agree. Yeah. So, but for
I'll try and
future
keep
book,
those to a minimum.
for future book spoilers, for people who are kind of if you're reading along the series with us and you've only read book one, I will let and we talk about future spoilers for future books. I will let that flash on the screen. We'll try to have that little window. But obviously, we're reviewing the entirety of book one. There's so much to talk about. So just right out the get
Mhm.
go, we're not doing non spoiler stuff. We're just gonna go right into spoilers. I just want to throw that out there. I know we're a
Good.
few minutes in already, but I should. But here we are.
Sufficient we have a sufficient, spoiler warning here.
Mm, yeah. So, I guess before we kind of jump into ratings and talk about emotional impact, characters, that type of thing, I want to ask you this: what edition of the book did you read? Because when I first was reading it, I didn't
Mm,
realize this, but there's like a prologue chapter called like the Ravens, where it kind of focuses on Egwene in the Edmund Fielders when she's like 8 or 9,
yeah.
which I didn't realize was a later edition, or a later chapter that Jordan introduced when at some point the book was split into two parts and we kind of had that as kind of a transition to kind of let Egwene kind of come in earlier, be introduced instead of just here she is as the love interest and she tags along with the Edmund Fielders. Which I
Mhm.
didn't realize that until I was listening to the audiobook and it completely skipped that and it just went right to the prologue with Luce Theron and Ishmael and all them. So I guess I want to ask you, did you actually read the edition with the Ravens chapter or what?
On my first read, I read it in, like, a paperback edition, and then
hmm
on the reread, I did an audiobook. So both of
Okay.
them, I don't believe I had it at all, so let me just actually grab my
Yeah.
first copy
Yeah. Because I don't know if you can still hear me, Richard, but my edition was this horrific cover, the
Ugh,
Amazon edition.
has
But
the
it's
Amazon
yeah,
sticker.
I
Oh,
know. So I
terrible.
apologize. I don't have the yeah. There you go. I like that edition. I don't have the epic. I forget what the um one is above your head where it's like the hardcover.
Oh, yeah, it's
Not
just out of frame.
It's not Folio Society, is it? I forget what that one is.
It not folio, it's, shoot, I'm now forgetting
It
where
says
it's
it's
from.
super expensive. It's super nice.
It is.
It's
I
like
got it.
the edition.
It was a gift from my, friends. My friends kind of all
Mhm.
came together for my birthday and all chipped in to buy it
That's
for me.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. But anyway, that's why I
Um,
asked because when I was going through the audiobook, it skipped that chapter. But when I first read it, I had this edition, and then it had the Ravens chapter, and then it had the prologue, and then it went into chapter one. So it's like, as a first time reader, I had no idea that like that wasn't a thing for all editions.
Yeah, my first time I read it does have the ravens. I
Okay,
must have
cool.
forgot, but
Okay.
yeah, I start this that's a weird it's a weird start, I
Hmm.
think, of starting off there,
Hmm.
then Luce there, and then back to Emmons Field.
Right.
It's
Especially
a
where it's
little
like
odd.
a prologue to the prologue, but just like the timeline of it, like it's not before the prologue. So yeah, it is
Yeah.
kind of confusing.
I also
But
just don't think it's incredibly necessary
hmm.
to start Egwene's character focus there. You know, like,
Yeah,
this not particularly her book,
right,
because you get a whole prologue focused on her, and then the rest of the book, she's in the background.
right.
You know what I mean? Of like,
Yeah.
I would almost prefer that, I would love a Gawain focused chapter somewhere around like
Hmm.
book 5.
Right.
Like book 5, a Gawain prologue would be cool
Hmm.
because it focuses on her. Or hell, even book 2, where
Yeah.
it has her POV.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
because you're right. It is kind
book
of
1's
interesting,
weird.
like tonally, where if you ignore the prologue with Luce Theron, there's really only two POVs throughout the book, where it's Rand 90% of the time, and then it's Nynaeve for like two or three chapters.
Yeah.
You know, and which again I
So,
didn't really remember until I was listening to the audiobook, and then when the narrator changed to a female, I'm like, what's going on? And then I realized, oh,
mhm.
this is Nynaeve. Okay, so it's like that's why it kind of stuck out in my memory that it's like it's really just those two POVs throughout at least book one.
It's very interesting to see where it starts off again. Is Wheel of Time is there are other books and other series that have more POVs.
Hmm.
Completely understand.
Right.
But by the time of book 14 of Wheel of Time,
Hmm.
you have so many different POVs that you're jumping between, and not just like, yeah, of course the main POVs you're switching between, but you also have a bunch of little cameo
Hmm.
POVs, or even ones where, yeah, your POV is a main character, but you're really following this other character for it.
Right.
I don't know. You're following just so many different characters. It's interesting to think that the very first book
Hmm.
is kind of a single POV book,
Right.
just Rand.
Hmm. Yeah, which then it's like if you think about it too, just as a fantasy reader, it kind of takes a little bit of the not the emotion, but like the stakes of, oh, who's the hero of the, it's like obviously it's Rand. You're following Rand.
Yeah,
So when it's like, oh, it's between you three boys, Perrin, Matt, and Rand. One of the three of you are the one that Balazamon is after. It's like
it's
it's
gotta be
Rand. You
Rand.
know.
Yeah, it takes the mystery there is no mystery to
That's the
it,
word. Thank you,
but
mystery. Yeah.
it's tense
Hmm.
because the what I think this book does really well for that is, yeah, there's no mystery of like, we know and I don't even think they mention, correct me if I'm wrong, Nynaeve doesn't really mention the Dragon Reborn till the end, right?
Like
It
Moraine,
just
you're talking.
says
I don't think they
Moraine.
do. I think they kind of like.
It's more
I, I think
Baalzamon
it's
is after you,
right.
one of you,
I
but
think
doesn't
it's
say
like
why.
there's like flitterings of obviously like Logain being like the false dragon. I think
Mhm.
that's the most conversation around the dragon you have until you're right. Like Moraine at the very end, it's like the dragon's reborn, like her like in her journal or whatever. I forget the actual scene. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right, and I think those conversations. I almost feel like it happens more with Tom, where like talking about when it's Tom, Matt, in Rand, they're kind of on the ship with Bayle, and they're kind of on their own, separated from everybody. Again, I could be wrong, but I feel like Tom kind of mentions the dragon at some point, or I don't know. But I feel like it's
Mm.
almost more out of characters outside of Moraine that talk about it until like that very last page.
Yeah, so the mystery isn't necessarily like who is Baalzamon after.
Right.
It's why. So
Yeah,
we know
that's
it's
true.
Rand, but then there's also the additional mysteries of something's going on with Perrin.
Hmm.
Like, he's clearly not just the innocent, he's just not the innocent bystander. Something also is going on with Perrin.
Hmm.
So there is added mystery. And then Matt is also just not that great in book 1, but
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
He gets there eventually.
Yeah.
But we're kind of going on a tangent. Do you want to start off with your overall rating of the
Yeah,
book?
you're right. We should. So yeah, out of 10, my overall rating for Eye of the World was a 9.2, which for me is
Wow.
very high. Yeah.
Very high score.
Yeah.
I'm gonna seem like the Wheel of Time hater now.
Yeah. What do you got?
My original score for Eye of the World, on the old rating system, is a 6.85 out
Holy
of 10.
shit. Richard. I don't remember it being that low. Yeah, when I
I
because
yeah.
when I originally read the book, and I was on Goodreads at the time, but I wasn't doing like ratings or anything. I just like this book blew me away. Kind of like
Mhm,
really opened my mind of what fantasy could really do. And it just on Goodreads it was a 5 out of 5. But it's like obviously with out of 5, it's like what does that really mean? Especially on Goodreads when it's like just solid whole numbers where it's like it's either a 4 or a 5. There's nothing in between. So at the time it was
mhm.
probably maybe closer to like 4.5. Which I think kind of reflects that in the 9.2.
Yeah,
So.
and thing is, that's my straight up average.
Hmm.
I maybe would wanna give it a little higher if I just go by my gut. Like, if
Yeah.
I wanna feel like, what I wanna feel
Hmm.
that this book is really worth a 7, 7.5 out of 10.
Hmm.
It's
Well,
what
let
I
me just
feel,
skip ahead.
but
Even what's your emotional impact? Because I feel like emotional impact tends to be like that gut check. This is what it tends to be.
I gave it a 6.
Oh, Richard, no. I can understand why though. I can
Yeah,
understand.
no, it's the biggest emotional factor, with this book
Hmm.
is Rand is not an incredibly compelling character for me, book 1.
Hmm.
Like, I remember even when I first started reading it, I read it for some of the mystery elements of, "Okay, hey, this world's pretty cool.
Hmm.
I'm interested in the stuff going on, the background things that, um, introduction to Bayle Domon."
Hmm.
Like, from book 1, I
Yeah.
liked Bayle Domon a lot. He
Hmm.
was one of my favorite side characters to kind of pop in on.
No, it's pretty great.
But Rand himself,
Right.
he to quote my, my friend Austin,
Hmm.
you know, "Bland Rand"
Bland, right?
going to
Yeah.
book 1. I promise, book 2,
Yeah.
I start to really fall in love with Rand,
Hmm.
but book 1, not so much.
I,
What
I,
about you? What are your thoughts on, our titular main character where we get most of the
Yeah, I was
storytelling?
just about to
What are your
say,
thoughts
I
on
feel
Rand?
like I'm maybe a little too forgiving. Where it's like I didn't really think he was all that boring until people were like, he's bland ranch, just a typical farm boy turned hero. Like I
Mhm.
don't know, like I didn't really have that too many negative thoughts, and maybe because my baseline was like Aragon. That was like
Ah.
that was my like the story or the series I fell in love with growing up, and that's really what made me fall in love with fantasy. So kind of just
Mhm.
thinking like the comparisons from Aragon, who I really enjoyed, to Rand, and how it's like they're really kind of very similar character structure. Obviously, like Aragon, he's a dragon rider, and that's ironic. Now it's a dragon reborn. Um, but it's like, I don't know. I think I'm way more forgiving for that type of thing, because too, like I said in our last video, rave about the world feeling like a living, breathing world, and we
Mhm.
really get to explore that world. Yes, it's through Rand's eyes or bland Rand, um, but I almost feel like that kind of made him more interesting because I was excited about where he was going next and what he was going to see and do next, um, which
Yeah.
I think is maybe more of a benefit or a pro to the world building than the character.
I'll talk about it a little bit more in the character section, but there
Hmm.
is one element of Rand that's carried forward
Hmm.
from this book that I think was handled really well. That
Hmm.
it starts off at a very boring place,
Yeah.
but is handled in an interesting way going
Hmm.
forward in the series.
Yeah. And I
But
think too for book one, I think again, just last thing I'll talk about it is maybe giving him a little extra grace too, is because like I mentioned before last video that he's like the reader insert. Like he knows very
mhm,
little about the outside world. You as a reader are just being introduced to the outside world outside of the two rivers. So it's like the actions he takes, like as a dumb sheep herder farm boy, it's like I would probably do something very similar. I wouldn't know any better, you know. So I don't know.
well, actually, that's a question on the reread here for
Hmm.
emotion, how you felt. So I know I felt very emotionally different on my
Hmm.
first read compared to my second read.
Hmm.
Rand and Moraine being the best example of first read through, I'm going, "Who is this Moraine
Right.
character?" Rand's right to be
Hmm.
a little bit she's shady.
Yeah.
She seems pretty cool, but something else is going on,
Hmm.
and, you know, paranoid Rand, and I'm with Rand
Hmm.
from basically 90% of it.
Right.
The reread, though,
Hmm.
I'm on Moraine's side.
Right.
I'm just going like, "Ah,
Yeah.
these idiot wool-headed
Right.
sheep herders.
Right.
Just listen to
Yeah.
the Aes
And it's
Sedai."
like, yeah, on the first reread, you're right. You're like, you're shady. It's like don't really trust her. But it's like on the reread, it's like really paying closer attention to what she does and the actions she takes. There's really no reason they shouldn't trust her. She stuck her neck out for them so many times. She saved their lives so many times. It's like
Yeah,
the shadiest thing you could say is that she sunk the ferry after they crossed the river. And it's like,
which
but it's like,
the enemies are
boo
on their
hoo.
back.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Of course she did that.
Right. It's like every other time she's like putting her neck on the line because like she with using the Ongirl like puts her energy to the max, like reve- revigorating the horses, revigorating everybody else, and then she's there like a lump on a log, like trying not to fall asleep. And it's like they're upset with her because she's trying her best, but she's not telling them everything. Because if she did tell
Yeah,
them everything, their little pea brain minds would explode because like their one sided view of the world, you know. So, no, I
yeah.
agree.
No, you completely get why she wouldn't tell them everything. And
Hmm.
one, she's kind of proven right.
Right,
Rand is not ready for any
right,
of the truth that she
right.
can lay down on him.
Yeah.
But I will say it's a big reason why Rand and the others don't trust her immediately
Hmm.
is the prejudice against Aes Sedai. And the
Yeah.
Aes Sedai attitude
Hmm.
is present with Moraine.
Hmm.
Like just the superiority complex and then not willing to share the truth.
Hmm.
It's very much like always playing a game kind of thing
Hmm.
and twisting words. Like
Hmm.
Moraine does it as good as the rest of them.
Right.
And sure, she has great intentions through hindsight, but at the
Yeah.
time,
Hmm.
yeah, she acts like an Aes Sedai and she kind of fulfills the stereotype that
Hmm.
farm these farm boys and farm girls have.
Yeah, and I think it was really fun too because I can't remember. I could be wrong, but I don't even think it's mentioned in Eye of the World that Aes Sedai can't lie. So it's like seeing her like telling the truth. Like I forget exactly the scene, but there was a scene I think where they're like, "Moraine, are we going to be okay? Is she going to make it?" And like she starts to answer, and then she stops, and she's like, "I can't promise that. I don't know." So like things like that. So you're right. Like she does kind of twist the words. Um, but another thing I want to get at is that she like the comparison once they get to Camlin, with I forget how to say her name, but elite the red Aja, the Elidia,
Oh, Elida.
Elida, but just like kind of seeing the contrast from Moraine, who's very like, on their side, very nice and soft hearted, to Elida, who is seems very cold and cruel. Um, just kind of seeing the juxtaposition from there as well. Kind of
Sure.
like Elida is like what I think most people think of as the ideal, not ideal, but the typical Aes Sedai. And then,
Yeah, they're
yeah,
definitely part of the reason the stereotypes
right,
of Aes Sedai are so bad. Well, also they're the traveling ones. Like the Aes Sedai that
true.
travel the world are most of the ones that are interact with a lot of people is the Reds because they're
Hmm.
going around hunting men.
Hmm.
It's not going to give you a good reputation.
That's true.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no, emotion wise, with Rand, it was an interesting juxtaposition between first read and second read.
Hmm.
I will say, even on second read, Matt pissed me off.
Yeah.
Matt, book one and book two,
Hmm.
we'll later get into it, but it carries into book two, is one of my least favorite characters I've ever read.
Hmm.
Oh, God, he's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, immensely frustrating.
Yeah.
And I get
I
it.
don't know
He's a
if it.
stupid farm boy, but
Yeah.
ah,
I don't know if it's because I just know what happens with him, and I'm kind of still a little bit on that high from the end of the
mhm,
series. But I didn't really feel as frustrated with him this on the reread, at least with book one. I think I will on book two. But it's like honestly, the worst thing he does is hiding the fact that he took the dagger, and then him and Rand kind of defend the fact like, well, you said he couldn't take the gift. He didn't give it to us. He just happened to
he
have it, and we
just
walked
took
out
it.
with it. Like to me, that's
Yeah,
like, okay, you guys are idiots. But it's like,
yeah, no, it's like, you're morons.
yeah. But outside of that, it's like Matt didn't piss me off too much. It was more just what the dagger was doing to him that kind of made me upset. But I could kind of see past. It's like, okay, it's the dagger's fault. It's not Matt's fault. But it is Matt's fault because
Yeah,
he took the debt. So I don't know. I'm
yeah,
kind of convoluted, or I have mixed feelings with Matt right now.
the main thing is just kind of frustrating to
Hmm.
see and talk. Like, yes, I understand he's being manipulated by the dagger. but it's not fun.
Right.
It's not fun to be around where, book 3
Hmm.
on. He's super fun.
Yeah.
One of my favorite characters ever. I love
No, it
him.
is great.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I could forgive it, especially. Like I know what he becomes, and it's not awful.
Hmm.
So,
What
but
about?
that's kind of my emotional
Mhm.
feeling on this.
Okay.
Overall, I think it's better than average, but not super amazing. There were some lull points,
Hmm.
but there were some really exciting points. Like I think the ending is pretty fun
Hmm.
and exciting. Maybe a little quick, like,
Hmm.
oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Just all at once. What happened here?
Yeah.
But
But I think
still.
knowing the context of everything else, like around the Forsaken and who Belazamon really is in book one, and seeing that, I think made me way more emotionally invested than I was the first time around. I don't know if I mentioned
Mhm.
this, but my rating for emotional impact was an 8.9. So obviously still very high.
Yeah.
With that average of 9.2. But yeah, the ending, like kind of like I said already, with like the Green Man, he's on there for like maybe 30 pages, and then and then he's not there anymore.
Yeah. I mean, okay, non-spoiler non-spoiler talk, I will keep it as minimal as
Hmm.
possible as I can. But to some degree, doesn't it kinda pay off of by the end, the whole thing about the Green Man is how he can grow plants
Hmm.
and, like, a source, and can sing. He sings these songs and create he has the song of life,
Hmm.
effectively. Isn't it, I mean, it's kinda paid off through other little tidbits throughout the series of what, like, the Tuathawan are actually looking for.
True.
Like, even in book 1, I thought it
Yeah.
was kinda nice, so, like, they meet the Tuathawan,
Hmm.
and then they're looking for the song that
Hmm.
can grow trees and create life.
Is that the same song
The
though?
green
Because Loyal even says
No.
that he's spoken with the Tuathawan, or what's the Tinkers. That's how I'll
Mhm.
say it because I suck with names.
Yeah,
Like he's even talked
Tinker's
with
Tuatha
Tinkers and like has shared songs, but they're like, oh, that's not the song. Like, is
Yeah, well, it the Green Man's different.
hmm.
So, Loyal being an Ogier,
Yeah,
can, like, help grow things, but it already has to be planted and then can manipulate trees and
that's
things like
true.
that. The Green Man just, like, when he touches the ground, like, things spontaneously grow
That's
in
true.
similar ways to, book, what, 12? Book 12, a certain character?
Oh, yes.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? Very
Okay.
similar. Because I
That's
think by
true.
the end, there is a
Mhm.
song by the end, like, the Tuatha never get it, but it is shown. So I think the Green Man it's
Is
kind of I don't know. I don't know if it's, like, 100% confirmed, but I think
okay.
even in book 1, that's kind of a fun thing to see of, like,
Hmm.
"Oh, this is what the Tuatha were searching," or maybe it is.
I
At the
completely
very
missed
least,
that
it's
the first time.
close.
Yeah, I completely missed that. But also, what
Yeah.
you're referencing in book 12, isn't that explained as just like the patterns healing itself around him?
Yeah.
So okay,
I
which I
I don't
guess,
know. It
yeah. Anyway, no, you're right. You're right. That is very similar, which I
'Cause I
completely
I
missed.
believe they later on, like, Loyal and others, like, do a song and, like, I think it is referenced, but the Tuatha never get to hear it or
Hmm.
see it.
What if this is random and this probably should be in this video, but what if that song is from the Aiel history? Is that? Do you know what I mean? Like before the
Yes.
breaking, because they would sing
Um,
too.
I'm trying to remember that there is an actual history of, like, why are they searching for the song?
Hmm.
Man, I'm
Okay,
blanking on
whatever. We'll
why.
talk about that later. The IU
That's
aren't
fine.
even in this book, so that just popped in my head. So I'm, but
But
yeah,
that's the tie-in
now you
of
got me thinking.
The Green Man's not just completely
Yeah.
like, "Oh, here he is." The connection for me that made him a part of the world is, "Oh, the Tuatha are searching for this song that can grow plants
Hmm.
and bring life." And then you see the Green Man walk and sing and
Hmm.
grow plants and bring life. I'm like, "Oh,
True.
okay." So that's what kind of still
Yeah.
fulfilled the world, made that feel more alive.
Mhm. That's true. I guess I agree with you, but I think just my hang up on that was the fact that it's no longer the Green Man, but it's just what he was or what he stood for, I guess. But it's just not his physical being anymore. But whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think that makes sense. So okay. We should probably move on to characters because it's already half hour and we're on the first thing still.
Yeah, hey, when we get talking about Wheel of Time, we're gonna talk
Yeah.
forever.
So I'll just jump in and say my rating for characters was a 9.2, which is right on my average.
I gave it a 6.75.
Nice.
Hey.
That's higher. That's higher. We're moving up in the
That's
right
higher.
direction. Well, I guess let's talk about your favorite girl, Nynaeve, because we haven't really talked about her yet.
Oh, yeah, Nynaeve. So, we don't get too much, but she's, I think, the only other, POV other than Rand
Hmm.
in this entire book, right?
Hmm. I mean, unless you include the prologue, and then you could argue Luce Theron. But yeah,
Mhm,
but outside of the prologue, it'd be
yeah.
Rand.
I remember first read through not liking Nynaeve as much, like,
Hmm.
going kind of being a little frustrated with her,
Hmm.
but on the second read through, I loved Nynaeve.
I'm not gonna lie, because last video, I was kind of a Nynaeve hater. I do appreciate
Mhm.
her a lot more in this book. She is still not as diplomatic as I wish she could be. Is how I'll
Oh, yeah,
say
no,
it.
she is an incredibly flawed character.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
Hmm.
Like, oh my god, she calls everyone else a wool-headed sheep herder. She is.
Yeah.
Her head is full of wool.
Yeah.
Full. Like, it is compacted,
Yeah.
just rock hard wall of wool.
But there are character elements about her that I don't know if I just had forgotten or never picked up on the first reread, like her being an orphan. I
Mhm.
completely forgot about that. Like I thought
Well,
I think that made a lot more sense to me, like why she is the way she is. Like she doesn't have anybody else in her life to watch her. So I can understand
mhm.
why she's like, okay, now I have to make sure everybody else, because if I don't, then maybe they'll leave my life too, you know?
Oh, yeah, book 1, I think, does a fantastic job of setting up her character for the rest of the series
Hmm.
of so in book 1, we already have established she's the youngest wisdom. The wisdom being one of
Yeah.
the highest places of authority in the Two Rivers.
Hmm.
And not only is she's the youngest wisdom, everyone kind of disrespects her for it of like she's the youngest wisdom and she
Hmm.
constantly has to just fight to grab hold of that position. That if she's not forceful, people won't listen to her
Right.
because they'll go, "Oh, she's too young. Why
Hmm.
should I listen to her?" So she has to yell at them and like, "No, you're gonna listen to me. I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I was I was given this position. You're gonna respect my authority."
Hmm.
She has to fight every second of that. And then why? Why is she takes that responsibility very seriously. She
Hmm.
doesn't have that responsibility. She doesn't take authority because she wants authority. She takes authority because she has an immense self responsibility. She feels responsible for everyone in the village.
Hmm.
That she's willing to leave the village and go on this grand adventure. Like, I'm going to rescue our kids.
Hmm.
I'm going to get like they are my responsibility.
Yeah.
That's why she has all this authority. So her huge authority complex of her wanting to have control over everyone and tell everyone what to do and all these things comes from a really great place
Hmm.
of I don't want to bully you to bully you.
Right.
I want what's best for you.
Yeah.
And
I like to see it as
yeah.
like a big older brother who it's like
Mhm.
in the background, like he's probably beating up on you, but it's like at the end of the day, he just like wants to make you stronger, and he's also shielding you from things like he has to go through that you probably have no idea like as a little brother, you know. So I
Yeah.
see that. I agree. I think that's a good comparison. I like that. Yeah.
I think that's I think from book 1 we even see that of just the amount that all the main characters go through like with Moraine,
Hmm.
Nynaeve had to go on this adventure alone and track them down.
Which
I
is
find
very
that really
impressive.
endearing. I find it incredibly endearing to her character
Yeah.
of how much she's hunting down for these kids that, like, they aren't technically hers, but she has
Hmm.
this responsibility for them.
Hmm.
And when she is so she treats the rest of the world like she has to treat the Two Rivers. And
Hmm.
something I wanted to bring up, it remind so Nynaeve reminded me a lot of actually my own mother in
Okay.
a certain way.
Okay.
So I know go somewhere with the but
I was gonna say, are
my
you okay, Richard? Like, is there trauma
yeah,
we
a
gotta
little.
talk about?
Well, no, there's a certain story my mother would tell me. So
Hmm.
context: my mother hates cursing, hates it, doesn't
Hmm.
like it. She never curses.
Hmm.
Not a fan. However, when she was in the army, she's one, I think, believe the uh, second generation, but like one of the very first waves of women in the um, like armed forces specifically, like
Okay,
the intelligence agencies.
that's badass.
Um, and so when she was a officer, she constantly had to curse at the other infantrymen and all the privates, anyone below her rank
Sure.
to get them to do what she wants or
Hmm.
what she ordered. And she would tell me like constantly she would hear like she's standing right there, and another officer in front of her said like, I'll never take the orders from a woman.
Damn.
She's standing right there
Damn.
and blatantly disrespecting her, like, her rank and authority, that
Wow.
she had to browbeat people to get in line
Hmm.
because she's responsible for these other people. She
Right.
has to give orders, she has to get a job done,
Hmm.
and she's constantly has to scramble and fight and curse out these people
Yeah.
for her authority. That reminds me a lot of Nynaeve.
Yeah.
Nynaeve has been put into this position of authority, and people don't respect, and
Hmm.
she doesn't, maybe she doesn't want to, like, yell at people and curse them and beat them out, but she feels she has to.
Yeah. No, that's a great comparison, and that makes sense why you like Nynaeve so much. She's just your mother. But last thing on Nynaeve I want to talk about and why she's so great too, is because there's one scene where her like having to treat the outside world like she does at Two Rivers, and that actually works. Is when Rand is like first hears from Matt and Perrin that Nynaeve is there at the inn, or Perrin is they're in whatever, and I forget exactly the
Chamberlain.
city. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Perrin is like, "Oh, hey, she's here," and Matt and Rand, my God, I'm sorry. It's like, how the hell did she get here? Like, what happened to like she burnt like Moraine sunk the ferry, and then he's just like she literally bullied him to find another boat and get her across the river. And I'm like, okay, all right, Nynaeve, I see where that works out for you. And like, I just
No,
think
it works.
it works. Yeah,
It's surprise that's the thing. She does this because it works,
yeah,
and she doesn't know any other way,
hmm,
and the whole series is her learning other methods to get what she
yeah.
wants.
So I just think that's great. So,
It is a hard lesson. The reason why I love Wheel of Time is there's many other series that can have similar character arcs, but it's handled so quickly, of
hmm,
like, characters confronted with problem that they have to overcome. Maybe they miss it and then they overcome it and then
hmm,
we're done. Haha, look, character arc. I think Nynaeve is far more realistic of just
hmm,
constantly like it doesn't you don't grow overnight. You don't
right,
have this one moment and like, my character has changed.
hmm.
No, it's very, very small, slow growth.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you have like a traumatic event like Matt and you lose all your memories.
Unless you're dramatic event, lose all your memories.
I guess another character I want to highlight before we move on is Lan, actually, because
Okay, yeah.
he's in the forefront of most of the scenes, but you don't really learn too much about him except little snippets about like when he's in battle and he's yelling, or for Malkair, and or when Moraine is like whispering under his breath, like, "Oh, Lord of the Seven Towers," or like, things like that, where it's like you get little snippets, and then two, when in those couple of chapters where it's Nynaeve's point of view, and you can kind of see that she's starting to crush on Lan, and like
Yeah.
like seeing these little things highlighted, and like, oh, interesting. And then when they make it to the Borderlands, and then everyone's treating Lan like a king because he is, and then the Two
Mhm.
Rivers folks are like, Lan's a king? Like, what is this? Who is this? And when the Lord Captain of I forget what Borderland was talking to Egwene and Nynaeve about Lan because they were asking, and then Nynaeve is trying to act like she's not interested, but she's like, "Oh, Lan, what's go like? I want to learn more about Lan." So just kind of seeing that, not character progression, but just like unearthing who he is as a character, I think is really interesting.
Oh, yeah, it definitely goes to the world. I love as a character, Lan, mysterious and cool,
Hmm.
but not super, super interesting in book 1 as a
Hmm.
character. But all little tidbits of like, "Oh, this character's been around. This
Hmm.
character has deep roots in this world that
Hmm.
we don't know yet." definitely adds that mystery and the pull of why I want to continue reading.
And then when they're like, "Land, you got to raise the golden crane. Like we gotta make things happen." Then he just refuses. He's like, "I can't. I have different responsibilities now. Like I'm a warder." And like that again, just kind of like, okay, because we kind of sort of know what a warder is. Like obviously they're
Yeah,
attached
like
at the hip with their acid eye. But aside from that, like, what are these bonds he's talking about, or what are these oaths he's talking about? Like, is it really more important than his kingdom and like all these different things? So I don't know. And it just kind of shows him as a character too, like where his priorities are, and like he obviously has a very heavy sense of duty. Because I don't think it's till next book where he keeps him and Rand keep saying that line where um duty is heavier than a mountain, but death is light as a feather. That's one of my
yeah.
favorite lines in the book or in the series. Or one of that
Oh
theme is
yeah.
one of my favorite. But I don't think that's mentioned in this one.
I,
But it's like that's what I
I
was thinking of every time that was brought up.
oh yeah, and I love how much this is land throughout the series, but it's maybe it's subtle, maybe I think it's too subtle, but it's more obvious.
Hmm.
But how much of an influence Lan has on Rand's character going
Hmm.
forward. Of Lan really is the ideal that Rand tries to emulate.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like how Rand becomes a man is
Hmm.
reflected in how do I become more like Lan, or
Right.
how do I become more like how I see
Hmm.
Lan and who I think he
Yeah,
is.
and I think we sort of see snippets throughout the first book, but I think again, what's really highlighted at the end of the book after Rand realizes he used the one power and he's like, "Oh no, I'm a tainted man. Like
Hmm.
I'm going to go crazy. Like what am I now?" But Lan actually it doesn't see him differently in those last couple pages, and that really
Yeah,
makes Rand like things are going to be okay. Lan's got my back. Like so I think that's a great comparison. Yeah, that's a great
it,
scene.
it's it's really small. I don't know if maybe could be handled better. Is it too maybe not obvious enough? But I did like their connection.
Mhm.
That Lan does have a soft spot for Rand.
Yeah, and I agree. Again, it picks up way more in like book 2 and 3, but I
Hmm.
agree. I think that's great, and it makes me want to be friends with Lan too, or like be
Hmm.
have him be my mentor as well. Like
Yeah.
if I could have anyone out of the books be in real life, it would probably be Lan. Honestly.
I mean, a lot. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious of the comparisons to Lord of the Rings, but you
Hmm.
have, Moraine being the Gandalf insert, and then you
Hmm.
have Lan being the Aragorn
Hmm.
insert. And I just kind of find it fun of just both of them,
Hmm.
just that kind of dynamic together
Yeah.
going on. Like they're the best mentors you could possibly have.
Yeah.
So
No, that's cool.
yeah. Other characters though, we can maybe start like just a brief touch
Sure.
on. We talked about Matt,
Hmm.
Perrin.
Hmm.
I think is a really good start off.
Yeah.
Like in this book, like we get more of him, especially book
Hmm.
2 and on.
Yeah.
But what did you think about Perrin in this book?
So he's probably my favorite character out of it. I guess we did get Perrin POVs, didn't we?
Yeah, we
Now
did.
that we say
We did
that,
get.
people in the
Now that I'm
comments are
thinking of
probably
it,
like, "You guys are idiots," and
yeah,
now
yeah.
we're like 40
Hey,
minutes in the conversation, and
we get there eventually.
because Rand was not there when Perrin was having these fights with the White Cloaks and having these conversations with Elias.
It's
Um,
split. So
yeah,
when we're with Matt and Rand, we get
mhm,
Rand's
right,
POV, and then when we're with Egwene and Perrin, we
yeah,
get Perrin's POV.
yeah. I feel so dumb now. Like, did
I
I even
completely
read the
forgot.
book?
No, you're right. Of the narrator
Hmm.
is male, and then there's like a couple
Yeah,
chapters with Nynaeve, and then
yeah.
that's
So
when
I
it's
I
a
think that's
female
maybe just what it
narrator.
was just the male and female. But
Yeah.
anyway, Perrin is my favorite character, I think, and that's just because of he people see him as this big lumbering, not quite dope, but maybe just slow thinker. But it's like really when you're in his head, he's not a slow thinker. He just or not a slow actor. He just likes to think things through. Like especially
Mhm.
when they're in Sheo Ghul and he's like waiting for the right time to like run away. Like you kind of see that. He's like, all right, I'm just looking around, making sure things are good before he just bolts and then he gets caught up in fades and Trollocs. But I think him, similar to like Lan and Rand, Perrin and Elias have very interesting dynamic as well.
Mhm.
With Elias, obviously he's gone full wolf. He's a wolf man, and Perrin kind of sees that and he respects Elias, but he's like, he doesn't
I don't
really
wanna
know
be
what's
that.
going on. Yeah, I don't want to be that. And
Well
then slowly goes and
oh, yeah.
accepts that. I think is just really interesting.
Well, it definitely for especially for me, book 1, Perrin was my favorite POV.
Hmm.
Favorite character to follow, mainly book for many books, actually. Perrin was my favorite character,
Hmm.
and then it started to even out, and
Yeah.
then the other characters started to come up and match it, and then later on, some books passed, and so
Hmm.
it's it varied, but something I wanna highlight for Perrin's character, and this carries forward through the rest of the series,
Hmm.
is there's a moment when they're all together, Egwene kinda is pushing the boys around a little bit,
Yeah.
she's pulling her weight, she gets her way, whenever they say, "Hey, let's go right," she goes, "No, let's go left."
Right.
And she's, all that friction there.
Hmm.
The minute it's Perrin and Egwene alone together,
Hmm.
Perrin realizes that Egwene asks him,
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Hmm.
Where do we go?" And and he does pick up on it. Whoa, 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 wait.
Right.
She's listening to me. She's
Yeah.
asking me where to
Yeah.
go. I'm supposed to lead this now.
Hmm.
And there's something about Perrin where everyone knows how like they respect Perrin. He always
Hmm.
is calm under pressure.
Yeah.
He has this like, again the slow thinking, but he's he's meticulous with it.
Hmm.
And when he comes to a decision, it's normally a very good decision that he thought through, and people
Yeah.
respect that for a
Hmm.
leader.
And I think it
And
pays
so
off
even
too.
Egwene,
Mhm.
when push comes to shove, Egwene's like, "I'm gonna follow Perrin's lead.
Right.
I don't want to make a mistake."
Yeah, and
And
I think
that
this is kind of
carries
the first
forward for
couple seeds
him
of
everywhere.
Perrin being like the reluctant leader, and I think
Mhm.
it's a little easier for him in this book where it's just him and Egwene. But to Egwene's point, she still kind of gets her little edges in, where forcing him to ride on Bella every once in a
Yeah.
while, and he's just like, okay, whatever, got to pick your battles. Um,
Yeah, but the thing is, that's a great it's a great sign of what things to come,
mhm.
of one, how to deal in s relationships in general, not just romantic,
Yeah.
but, what you do as a leader. There's I think much, much later on, there's Perrin is told the advice of give your orders sparingly, because
Hmm.
if you order someone to do something once, you're gonna have to order them to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And so you gotta mainly pick your battles. Don't order them to do everything you want. Like you gotta let people choose some stuff that's not important. Like
Right.
let them have that.
Hmm.
But when it's important, you make the order.
Hmm.
And so Perrin kind of learns that lesson a little bit in book 1,
Yeah.
just a smidge. But then
Hmm.
also dealing with Egwene is also a little bit of what's to come with
Hmm.
dealing with Fael.
Hmm. But then as soon as he had Elias come in the Wolves, he's like, "All right, we're just gonna follow what Elias has to say," and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, and that's it's a good lesson of
Yeah.
a leader knows when to, or you should know, everyone should know when to delegate and when
Hmm.
to cede authority to someone who's more deserving or more appropriate for the situation.
Hmm.
So when it's just Egwene and Perrin, Perrin takes charge for like, okay, hey, I'm gonna start making some decisions. The minute Elias comes in, it's like, hey, Elias knows more.
Hmm.
Elias can actually get us out of here. I don't know where I'm going. Of
Right.
course we're gonna listen to him. So he's
Right.
very comfortable with giving up authority to someone who's deserving of
Hmm.
it.
So I think the last character I want to at least highlight before we move on to plot is Tom
Mhm.
Maryland, because I don't know what I was on. I completely forgot that Tom was in the first book somehow, even though a lot of these big plot points have Tom integrally involved.
Oh yeah.
So I don't. I'm like, I was reading. I'm like, at the beginning, they're like talking about, oh, we hired a gleeman for the festival, and I'm like, interesting. Like, I wonder what gleeman that is. It can't be Tom yet. And then it's like Tom. I'm like, I didn't know Tom was in the first. Like, I don't know what I was
he was
on, but it
he
was
was
like,
there from the beginning.
yeah, I was like
He was with
re-surprised.
them
Yeah.
the entire time. No, I love Tom. And this is okay, here's spoilers
Hmm.
for future books.
Hmm.
Skip 30
Yeah.
seconds. But even in book 1, you can see the sparks
Hmm.
between Tom and Moraine.
See, I was trying. I disagree. I
I saw
disagree.
it.
I was trying to like because at that big reveal at the end when they're like, "Oh yeah, we actually love each other," and like I feel like that was out of left field. And then I'm like, okay, Tom and Moraine are in the same scene. Let's look. And then he acts so disinterested. In my opinion, especially, and then he feels so jaded because of what happened with his nephew. That I'm like, that's
Yeah.
why I felt like there was a disconnect. But I
There
love to hear your take.
it carries forward, so maybe it's not as strong
Hmm.
in this book,
Yeah.
but late so I've reread up to book 4
Hmm.
so far, and there are hints.
Okay.
The main thing is you start here of Tom and his aversion like, his aversion to Aes Sedai,
Yeah.
and it falls to Moraine,
Hmm.
but you see that the cracks start to form as later goes on, and Moraine kinda breaking down his walls and understanding him
Hmm.
at a really close that Tom is able to keep with these barriers up, and Moraine breaks them down,
Hmm.
and he can't hide from her. That she sees him
Hmm.
very much going forward in later books, and I think that's part of the he's forced to be vulnerable to
Hmm.
her, and he feels that. So,
Yeah.
that's why I think it carries much further on,
Yeah.
but it's very much a background
Yeah, I'm sure there's
love story. You
more
see
drops,
little
like you said, in the next
snippets.
couple books, but yeah, just at least from book 1, I'm like, I still don't see it. I'm not
Oh, no,
convinced.
when on my first read through, when it happened, I was like, "What?
Yeah,
Excuse me?"
right. So,
Yeah,
alright.
no, it came as left field for me too.
Yeah. So, any other characters you wanna talk last minute before we
Oh, lord.
I know.
Um, there's plenty of others. Brief thing of I love Bayle Domon.
Mhm.
Bayle Doman's one of my favorite characters in the whole series because I love seeing his perspective on things.
Mhm.
We don't really get his perspective here, but it's a great setup of him thinking, "Oh, the Trollocs are after me.
Right.
Oh no!" Like him thinking he's the center of it, and
Mhm.
fair enough. He's like, "Oh, I'm being hunted. I need to run." And it's like
Right.
that's great.
Well, and then later too, once the 3 of them, Tom, Matt, and Rand actually get off his ship and then are in that town, and then that crewmate that gets kicked off and is starting telling the stories about
Hmm.
Bale and like, oh, he's actually a dark friend. And then like Tom's
Yeah.
like, oh shit, his name's probably gonna get around to a fade. And then just kind of that payoff where it's like the fades might actually be after Bale now because of that story. Which I think was just really funny actually. So
Oh
that's a
yeah.
good point.
No, I love all that, and just going right into plot here.
Hmm.
Him giving the coin Moraine gave him.
Hmm.
That's how Moraine's able to find Bayle Domon
Hmm.
so easily because the tracking coin. I think is really cool.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So I
Okay,
guess I
but
guess with plot, what did you rate it out of 10?
I give it a 7. 7 out of 10.
That's we're going in the right direction.
We're going up. We're going up in the right direction.
Yeah. Mine was just a
I
solid
yeah
9. So I still
yeah.
really enjoyed it.
There's some pacing issues for me. There's some scenes that are not as good, but mainly the reason why I won't give plot incredibly high is mostly the rushed ending.
Yeah,
So they're
that's
the
true.
point where they're at the borderlands and they or not even at the borderlands, they use the ways to like
Mhm.
just kind of like, oh my god, way too far. We're gonna use the ways and we're gonna jump right over there.
Yeah.
And we have this whole journey planned out, and then at the you know at the ninth hour, we get or at the 11th hour, Moraine we get a
Mhm.
dream sequence, and Moraine's like, "We're going to the eye, and we're gonna use ways. We're gonna go over there."
Mhm.
That's where I don't know. The ending
Mhm.
for me just felt sort of
No, I
rushed.
agree, but I think on a reread, it didn't bother me as much because I can't remember 100%, but I feel like the ways were kinda teased throughout too, where
Yeah,
it's like
it's more the why of Moraine is
that's
all
true.
this planning.
That's true.
She's been for over like 25 years. This
Mhm.
whole plan, and then just kind of all of a sudden
Yeah.
dream happens, and then I'm gonna change up my entire plan,
Yeah.
and
That's true.
she gets
Oh,
tricked
yeah,
because of
there
it.
was
It's like,
a
eh.
Aiel that told the Tinkers a few years ago that Sight Blinder was coming, like, "Oh, no, I gotta do this immediately." Yeah, you're right, that is kinda a little cheesy.
That's where that's a plot thing
Yeah.
of, "Come on, Moraine. You're not gonna throw away all these plans because like, the one dream happened and you
Yeah,
get
that's
tricked,"
true, and
and
then even kinda,
eh.
like, strong-arming Loyal into helping them, and he's like, "Oh, we haven't used the ways in years," and, like, Elder Harlan or whatever his name is, would, like, call me so hasty, it's these things where it's, like, kind of forcing Loyal to do things he didn't wanna do too. I agree.
Mm.
So maybe
Yeah, and
nine's a little generous, but it's staying at a 9.
yeah. Good. I'm happy. Someone needs to give it a 9 if it's not me.
Yeah.
But the the rest of the plot, there's some good, some bad. There's I think pacing wise, it could be better
Yeah.
for book one.
Mhm.
'Cause it's a little slow even for my taste, kind of meandering and with characters that I'm not fully in love with yet.
Right.
That's the stuff that's not as great. So, like all the stuff with Rand and Matt alone
That's true.
is
That was a little
fine, but both characters by this point I'm not in love with, so all their time alone is more frustrating
mhm.
than exciting.
Yeah.
Where I keep going like, let's get back to Perrin. I want
Right.
to know more about the wolf stuff.
True.
Like that's what I want to see.
Yeah.
So there's stuff like that where I'm not going to get the plot like super high,
Mhm.
but I still think it's much better than average where there's enough tension and
Mhm.
mystery and things meander along that I'm still sucked into the what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I think part of the reason it was a little higher for me too on the reread is yes, maybe the ending was a little rushed, but just with the payoff with the ending and realizing the Forsaken are actually starting to break their bonds. And I forgot that there were two Forsaken at the end. Like for some, I
Yeah,
thought it was just one. I forgot that, and like didn't even remember who their what their names were or anything like that. So just seeing them again, like, oh, that's fun. Um,
yeah,
and then it's like that's actually JK. That's actually not the real threat yet. Now Belazamon or
yeah,
Ishmael, whatever name you want to use, is actually the threat. And then that happens, and then Rand goes and uses the Eye of the World, the magic, or this Sadine, um, and like then he realizes, oh shit, I'm a male Aes Sedai now. I'm gonna be tainted. I'm gonna end the world. Like just him like thinking these things but not saying them quite out loud, but it's like knowing the context of them, having the bigger
definitely
payoff.
the start.
Yeah.
It's the start of his spiral, and this is something where I wonder if this whole thing was redone.
Hmm.
If we were to redo that, I know Austin really didn't like how long that stretch. We get a whole book that the real spark and start of Rand's character journey
Hmm.
is him finding out he's an Aes Sedai and he's gonna go crazy,
Yeah.
kill the world. That if that was done earlier, and we got
Hmm.
a whole book of we started there, like
Yeah.
little interesting, and then he finds out he's a channeler, and then throughout the book we get that
Hmm.
of him mulling over and keeping those thoughts to himself.
Yeah.
Would that be more like I think maybe that would be the more interesting plot developments and be more interesting for Rand's character,
Hmm.
and just keep almost all the plot scenes the same, the exact same.
Yeah.
But now we have Rand's internal monologue of
Hmm.
going, "Oh, I need to keep this hidden." And now him and Matt could be like, "Oh shoot, maybe I can channel, but I can't let him
Hmm.
find out.
Isn't
He's
that
going to reject
kind of
me."
what book two turns into, or at least at the beginning?
Sort of, but more people know.
That's true.
It, exactly, but
That's true.
that's the point is the character of Rand kind of starts
Yeah.
in book 2,
That's true.
not book 1, and he's the main character. He's 9,
Yeah.
most of the POV. So
That's true.
I think that's the frustrating thing for someone like Austin.
Hmm.
And I understand. I still like it. I still
Yeah.
enjoy it. So
And then
it's not
something
the
too,
biggest
just
rub for
on
me.
Rand channeling. I think, and then Moraine kind of just. I think in book two she describes, "Oh yeah, I could figured you were a channeler because these things happened." And then I had that in
Oh
the back
yeah.
of my head, and actually seeing some of these things happen, like back to
Hmm.
when Matt and Rand are by themselves, and the dark friends are coming at them at that one tavern, where they're like, and then they're trapped in there, and there's bars outside of that window, and they're just outside the other side of the door, and Rand's just like, we need to escape, things need to happen, and then the lightning strikes and blows a
Yeah.
hole. It's like that's an example of like just out of
Yeah.
his need, and then it's you kind of if you were paying attention even on a first read through, you could figure that out based off how Moraine talks about the one power to Egwene and Nynaeve. It's like you've like especially to Nynaeve, like you've probably used it. Like if you've ever had a great need and things have just happened, that's you using the one
Yeah.
power. Um,
And or when Rand is sees Egwene on Bella and
yeah,
they're tiring out and he wants and a great need to make sure that
yeah,
they have energy and that they're safe.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, like when they stop, Morain's like, Bella's completely.
Yeah.
I don't need to do anything for Bella.
Yeah.
She's completely energized.
And there's another
Huh?
one too where
Weird.
when they're on Bayle Domon's ship, or they first jump on his ship, and then the Trollocs are like climbing over, and Rand like lost his sword or whatever, and like there's a Trolloc right in front of him. He's just like, this Trolloc needs to like die or get pushed off, whatever, and the boom comes and just smacks the Trolloc off. And then later, it's like Bale's yelling at his sailor. He's like, "Didn't I tell you to strap this down?" He's like, "I did strap it down. Like I did it extra good." Like that was probably Rand just out of his great need.
Yeah. And then you see a little bit of the. I was corrected on this. I thought it was the madness
Hmm.
that after he's channeling, he because there's several moments of Rand like doing weird stuff
Yeah.
of like him climbing up the top of the mast
Yeah.
and people going like, and him realizing this is really dangerous. This is stupid.
Right.
Why am I doing that? Same thing when he climbs the wall in Camelin
Hmm.
and it's like going, huh? My hands are
Yeah.
incredibly. What did I do?
No,
Why did I
no
do that?
regard for his well being, even though he's a great climber, just because of what him and his friends have done over in the
Yeah,
foothills or whatever. But yeah, you're right.
but those were always weird moments where afterward he goes like, "What was I doing? Why did I do that?"
Right.
And I thought that was the madness,
Hmm.
but it's actually it's the euphoric feeling you get after like using the one power for the first time. Like Egwene gets something similar. Of like it's the first time you get that you feel alive and rush, and it's too much for you. You
Hmm.
feel on top of the world. It's that euphoria, and so that's why.
That would
Yeah.
make sense.
So it's a little different. It's not the madness.
Hmm.
It's not the taint,
Well, and then
but
even too,
something
once
similar.
when Matt and Rand are by themselves after that lightning strikes, and then Rand is like sick for those couple days after. That's him
Hmm.
basically like overdosing on the one power because his
Yeah.
body hasn't really regulated how to use it yet.
Hmm.
Which Moraine kind of talks about, like, oh, you like, to Nynaeve again, like you probably these things have probably happened, and then you might have been sick after. It's just the one how the one power works because you don't really know how to use it yet.
Yeah, which all this goes into really good plot. I
Hmm.
think this is well seeded into that you can if you are careful enough, you can pick up on the clues, and that's why the reread is so enjoyable
Hmm.
because you can pick up on those clues
Yeah.
if you're paying attention.
Hmm. Which is really cool. So.
But is there anything else with plot that we're kind of missing out on? Because so
Hmm.
overall plot things to talk about, we briefly mentioned um the start with the Evans Fielder, then
Hmm.
they go to um Shadar Logoth, and then they get separated,
Hmm.
which and then we get Perrin and Egwene, then Rand, Matt, and then Nynaeve and Moraine and Lan.
Hmm.
And we have those, and then they come together, and then but is
Yeah,
there anything in they kind of wanted to highlight?
that's a good question.
Because we have touched on kind of these plot points throughout,
Hmm.
but we also haven't really talked about maybe like Shadar Logoth, maybe.
That's true because that does play, especially later in the books too, when Rand revisits it too. It kind of plays off. But I don't know because that's where Matt gets the dagger. I don't know because it's such a
It
plot. I feel like
a
it's hard to
lot
just like
happens.
you know.
A surprising lot happens into this pretty thick book.
Yeah. I don't think so. At least off the
Mhm,
top of my head, I feel like we kind of touched on a lot of things, at least in some capacity. Was there anything you wanted
mhm.
to highlight?
No, overall, I think the the things to focus on is I think the Easter eggs and
Hmm.
the little clues for what comes later is really well handled. I think it's one of the best things that Robert Jordan can do.
Yeah.
He sets up a lot of stuff that does pay off throughout the series,
Hmm.
and it always feels deserved. So when something happens in the later series and you go, "Oh, that kind of came out of nowhere," it probably didn't.
Right.
You just weren't paying attention. Like, and that's what a reread is so enjoyable on is like you realize, oh, this stuff didn't come out of nowhere.
Hmm.
This was set up from book one and it pays off book 10.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. No,
That
that is
we're going to be talking about something in book two later
okay.
on, which I find amazing. There's a plot point in there that's not paid off till book 11, and I love
Interesting.
it.
Okay.
It's amazing how that's incredibly set up. So
Hmm. Ooh,
That's book 2.
speaking of which, when they're on the river with Bayle and like just that random shiny tower, for example.
Oh, true, true. We do get a little bit of a tease like, "Hey, look, there it is."
Yeah. And then like 'cause later in book 10 or like whatever it is when Matt talks about it, like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. I'm like, have we seen that before? But revisiting, we have seen
Oh.
it before. So
Yeah,
um
we get a lot of interesting stuff there.
yeah. So one of my favorite things about this book, even over world building, is actually dialogue and prose. I rated this
Really?
as a 9.5 out of 10. I think
Wow.
Jordan's prose is just phenomenal. I know a lot of people say, I know even earlier you were saying he likes to meander a little bit, and especially later when talking about like Aes Sedai, he likes to describe what people wear, maybe a little bit much. But when you're in someone's POV and you're in their mind, it to me it just makes so much sense. And I think a lot of the way the sentences are structured are kind of how my mind works, where it's like if
Hmm.
he brings up a detail about like saying there's like a tea kettle on the fire, and then in a couple sentences later, it's like, oh, it's the tea kettle's whistling. Like then they go and grab it. Like I don't know, there's little details where it's like every little word actually has meaning instead of just this is what the scene looks like and this is what the characters are doing. It's like every little thing actually has a payoff, no matter how big or small the little detail seems.
Yeah, I definitely have to give maybe I should give it more credit. I gave it a 6.5 for
Hmm.
dialogue and prose. I think it's above average.
Yeah.
So for me, 5 is average.
Right.
6.5, it's above average prose.
Yeah.
So I'm not knocking it.
Hmm.
But you do bring up an interesting point of one of the enjoyable things about reading it is because Jordan describes the world so well and even describes the buttons on the
Hmm.
Carrion's dress
Yeah.
and all these little details that you think, good, I get a clear picture, but then later on, that's incredibly helpful for scenes where he doesn't have to spoon feed you later
Right.
on clues of like we get book prologue of book 2 type
Hmm.
deal where there's the secret meeting of the villains, and
Yeah.
I think this is fine to spoil it, like literally chapter 1.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go for it.
But you get meeting of the bad guys, and he doesn't describe who they are. We don't get names, we don't get location, we don't get anything.
Hmm.
But we get what they're wearing
Hmm.
and little details. And we go, "Oh, that person was from there. Oh, that person was there. Oh, I'm picking up the details here."
Hmm.
And because he described it well in book 1, we don't need him to spoon feed us in book
Right.
2. And it carries on throughout the whole
And
series.
it kind
Yeah,
of
you're right. Those
highlights.
little details are helpful.
Yeah, and it highlights the cultural differences too. Like if, for example, in a few books, like in when they're in tier and like the roads are very muddy, so then they wear these like stilt shoes over their shoes just to like avoid that. Like just even little things like that. And like him describing that like makes it feel like when they're in different parts of the world, it feels like they're in a different country or like they're like leagues
Mhm.
away from like when they're traveling. Just little details like that I think
Oh, yeah.
really adds to it.
Yeah, and how much I put that mostly into world building for me if
That's
with
fair.
my score.
That's fair.
But as terms of dialogue and prose,
Hmm.
especially this book, I don't know if the character voices are particularly unique and standoutish. There's
Hmm.
some good like each one has kind of like their catchphrases
Sure.
inside their head,
Hmm.
but it's not as much of a standout for me,
Yeah.
especially with the how Robert Jordan writes, where I come to love it. I come to enjoy it a lot. But we have the dialogue scene, and then we move on to, oh, now we're gonna go on for like 2 pages describing this scene
Yeah.
now, and now back to plot. And so that kind of disjointed writing
Hmm.
is very normal.
Yeah.
It's much more normal. I do prefer, for me, a Terry Pratchett or a Patrick Ruffus
Hmm.
style where the description is woven into the dialogue somehow.
That's fair.
I prefer that
Yeah.
on
I
writing.
think that's probably like if like a Rothfuss, for example, if they do that masterfully and it works really well, it's perfect, like a masterpiece. Like I know you don't really care for Name of the Wind, but you have to give it credit for how it's written. Like it's
Oh,
beautiful,
yeah.
beautiful lines of dialogue. But I think with Jordan, like yeah, maybe it's not the perfect way of writing, but I think he does it so consistent that even when I jumped to different, like after I read Eye of the World, I picked up different book, and like it's probably a different extreme, but God Emperor of Dune, and just like how different the the
Ah.
the prose is. I'm actually slightly not enjoying myself with God Emperor of Dune, just because it's like I have to think so hard about what's actually happening. Where um where Jordan, it's like I don't know why it just like works in my head so well.
I completely agree with you. It's very impressive for the entire series that Robert Jordan is able to give you this really deep world with tons of characters and all these different plot points going around and multitude of different countries and
Hmm.
all these different cultures. And yet I don't have to take notes
Right.
on any of this.
Yeah.
It's really simple to follow.
Hmm.
That's the impressive thing is it's written in a way that this complex world can be understood by everyone.
Hmm.
Um,
And if it's really that important, he'll bring it back up a little. Like he probably won't
mhm,
go as in depth as he did when he first introduced it. But he's gonna highlight like, oh yeah, that guy was wearing that color button, so you know that's who that guy is, even if you didn't remember his name or what his face, like who he did. Like there's little snippets like that's who it is. Like later when he
yeah,
introduced a lot of characters, like especially when you're in the White Tower with Aes Sedai, it's something that Jordan does that I really enjoy, but sometimes get frustrated by, is when he introduces a character, he names them like two or three different ways. Sometimes it's just like their first name, other times it's their last name, sometimes it's just like the yellow haired woman. It's like,
mhm.
so yeah.
It's somewhat confusing, but something that I've now had in reflection
Hmm.
is so I've been recently going back through Stormlight Archive and prepping for book five's coming out this year.
Hmm.
Super excited. Was a uh, doing a video with Bookborn and others on Stormlight 5 theories.
Nice.
So I'm going back through,
Yeah.
trying to remember all the things from the Stormlight Archive world in Roshar,
Hmm.
and realizing that both Roshar and the Cosmere and the Wheel of Time have very similar complex worlds and cultures.
Hmm.
Yet with Stormlight Archive, I don't remember them very well.
Okay.
It doesn't stick.
Hmm.
I enjoy it, all that, but with time removed, they don't stick in my head
Yeah.
as well as Robert Jordan's writing
Hmm.
does. That I remember the details with Wheel of Time. I don't remember the details with Stormlight Archive,
Hmm. That is
and
interesting.
I don't. I think part of that is definitely the writing style,
Hmm.
where maybe Sanderson does some great descriptions, but he also doesn't. He kind of keeps it going, keeps it flowing.
Yeah.
Like mentioned, then we move on. We're right into the action, right into the dialogue. Robert Jordan spends that time describing the world a few times where it now is cemented in my mind.
Yeah. I haven't read Stormlight yet. I only have the first one, but I have yet to do that, so I don't have a great comparison. I've only read a little bit of Sanderson. I've only read like Tress and Mistborn one, which I didn't love either of them actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Didn't love Mistborn 1.
no, I'm a little. I it's on
Hmm.
my TBR to go to book two for a couple months now, and I just haven't picked it up because a lot of people. I've heard a
Yeah.
lot of mixed things about two and three, especially like
Hmm.
everyone without a doubt. It's like, oh yeah, book one's amazing. Like book one, I still rated highly. Here, let's give me a second. I
Yeah.
still rated it as a 7.74, 7.74. So
Yeah.
it's still good,
Good score.
but it just didn't blow me away like I was thinking. And I know it gets more
Mm.
politicky in book two, which I didn't love. That's part of the reason it was so low, like so low at a 7.74. It's because the action scenes are great. Kelsier was amazing, but then by the end, it was like all politics. I'm just like, I don't
Mm.
like this. So
Well, so that's a combination of things, but
yeah.
you may like Stormlight Archive more just because that
Hmm.
grand scope of
Yeah.
it. Of you want epic,
Hmm.
Way of Kings is going to give it to
Yeah.
you.
And I know some people in the comments are probably like, Daniel, that's so ironic that you're complaining about politics when you're rating the Wheel of Time. And true, but Jordan just does it better in my opinion.
Yeah, the world feels more alive for me, and
Hmm.
I guess going right into the world building,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
gave it an 8 out of 10.
8
It's
out
my
of 10.
highest score for book
That was the
one,
highest you
and
said? So yeah, so
I only give it that low because I know with the rest of the series it has more to grow.
more to go.
I would
Yeah.
feel remiss to give it a 10 here when we got book 4.
That's fair.
it's something that I want
That's fair.
gets better.
Yeah. I rated it as a 9.4. So like I said, not the highest thing, but obviously that's still very high.
Yeah,
So,
it feels alive.
mhm.
It's no really no other series has come close
Mhm.
for me. There's
Yeah.
other things that maybe I will rate higher, like, oh, like, yeah, the writing's here is better, the action on this series is better.
Mhm.
It's Wheel of Time and, you know, Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Those are the worlds that just that are still alive in my head
Mhm.
long after I've read them.
Yeah. And I think something, at least with Eye of the World, that Jordan does really well, or it really seems to pay off with world building, is at the end of the book when we finally get to enter the Borderlands and seeing just how structurally different society is, and like where are all the farmers? They're all behind the walls because Trollocs are raiding them all winter and well into what should be spring now. And just how, like, just the transition from down in Andor and Camlin, like things are kind of hard. It's been a rough winter. It's not quite spring yet. Things are a little hard, but just the contrast from how bad it really is up in the Borderlands. But the Borderlanders, it's just another day in the office, you know. So just like little things like
Yeah.
that. Like I think that's the biggest contrast, at least in book one. And then, like I said, in future, like in tier, we see like the different clog things like that. Um, but yeah, just world building in Eye of the World or Randland is just my favorite that I've ever read personally.
Yeah, no, it's that's the I struggle to put I think Middle Earth is probably better. It is a better world.
Hmm.
Fine. But for me, I just enjoy so much of the with Middle Earth, it's the history.
Yeah.
So we're in all of the cool history stuff is in Middle Earth's past.
Right.
And that's cool to see.
Hmm.
With the Wheel of Time, the culture is alive today.
Yeah.
In the mod like
Hmm.
there is the history, but we still have that modern day.
Right.
There's so many things going on
Hmm.
while we're reading, and that's why it feels more alive
Yeah.
to me.
And like they're rediscovering things or discovering or inventing things that haven't existed yet. Maybe in the past, turning of the wheel it has, but to them it's completely new. And just how that changes the landscape. Like for warfare, for example, in the last few books, just how like the greatest minds or the greatest generals, how they think about warfare and like using the Aes Sedai and just magic in general, and how that changes
Mhm.
warfare. Like just as this one example
Yeah.
is just yeah,
Or
chef's
how we
kiss.
get even in book 1,
Hmm.
we get descriptions of different scenery and
Hmm.
different things, and you don't know it until a little bit later, but that the things that are being described, if you pay attention, is like glass buildings
Yeah.
that have been molded over, like, it's more of a post a post sci-fi world.
Hmm.
And so we see all like they describe this weird hill building with sparkling tower with
Yeah.
moss covered. It's like, that's a skyscraper that's now like been abandoned and covered with moss.
Yeah.
And so
It's just crazy.
you pay attention, you see that cool history of like
Hmm.
what was this world like before the death, like
Hmm.
before the breaking of the world.
Yeah. Or even like going back to that tower that Matt saw, that big metal
Hmm.
tower. Like, that's metal? How is that metal? There's no rust on it. Like, how is it standing on its own? Like, all, yeah. So things like that. And
Hmm.
another thing that I didn't realize until recently, but on Reddit, of course it's Reddit, I saw that
Yeah.
somewhat people were saying that Jordan said that Randland was on Earth, like on our physical planet here. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah, I think so.
That
I
was the
think I
first I heard
remember
of
that.
that. I'm like, interesting. And just how that.
Yeah, Earth is just one turning of the wheel. Like
Mhm,
our existence is
mhm.
one turning.
So, and I think that's really cool, and it kind of makes sense where it's like even like the continents not being how they are today kind of makes sense because the breaking of the world, that doesn't matter. With the breaking of the
Well,
world,
and
you can physically shift the shape of the continents, and what
yeah.
used to be an ocean is now a desert, and what used to be a forest is now whatever, is now mountains.
Oh yeah, the continents don't need to match at all
Yeah.
because the one power can move mountains
Hmm.
literally. But yeah, the world to me is just so special. I'm
Hmm.
so glad to share it with you on this.
Yeah,
of just how great it is.
absolutely. All right, are there any closing thoughts you want to throw out here, Richard? Or anything you're looking
Um,
forward to book 2?
I'm really looking forward to talking about Rand's character growth in book 2
Mhm.
because I think he really does start to come into his own, and book 2 is one it's top there in my top 5 books of the Wheel of Time.
Mhm.
So, amazing jump in quality for me.
Mhm.
Of I think the action's better, the pacing's much better, characters are all better.
Yeah.
Everything is improved in
Mhm.
book 2. And so it's a great barometer where if someone's maybe lukewarm on book 1, like you've read book 1 and you're feeling like, "Eh, it's okay. It's pretty good." But you're not fully sold yet.
Mhm.
Book 2 is the great test of, hey,
Yeah,
if you really love book 2, you're going to love the rest of the series.
I agree. I'm just excited for more wheel time to be honest.
Oh yeah.
I'm just excited to like kind of pick up on those Easter eggs. It's like, hey, I know what that leads to.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of those in book 2
yeah.
and some real important ones
Mhm.
too of like huge reveals that come through are it feels obvious now on a reread
Mhm.
and it which makes it feel so right when
Mhm.
it comes around.
Yeah, and I'm just excited too to like re be reintroduced to some of my favorite characters. Like I think Gaul is introduced in book 2 with Perrin. I think
Mhm.
I can't remember, but
Yeah.
he's like one of my favorite Aiel. That is kind of
Oh
on
yeah.
the back burner
He's
until
so
like
much fun.
towards the end. But like his relationship with Perrin, I think is just a lot of fun too. So,
Mhm.
but yeah,
Also, I like his relationship with the two other Aiel women. They're just
yeah,
kind of a fun friction of like
true.
I don't know.
And again,
You get that from a distance and it's kind of fun.
yeah, and again, just with the cultural differences and like
Mhm.
an ideal man can have multiple wives and just like that's their thing. But then like the Western
But
cultures will
the,
say they're like that is absurd. Like why would you want more than one wife?
yeah, but thing is, even in that situation, it's the men can have more than one wife, but the wives have to propose,
Yeah.
and so it the women in the ideal society probably do have, in many ways, more authority
Hmm.
than the men, and yet the men have more. It's more. I don't know.
Yeah.
It makes sense for their culture, especially with how many of their men die. Of like,
True.
there are more women, and
Yeah.
so
One, if you
you
just look
kind
at
of
the
have to
relationship
share.
between a lot of the wise ones and like the chieftains who are married to wise ones and just like whose opinion at the end of the day like really comes across in the decision making and all those. Yeah. So I agree.
And it emulates in a very similar way the Two Rivers and
Hmm.
the women's circle and
Hmm.
the council and it all of this the entire world of the Wheel of Time is in harmony, but they're not the same.
Hmm.
Of each different culture deals with it it's a focus of the entire series of men and women and how
Hmm.
they get along and there are different ways for men and women to communicate
Hmm.
and get along and who has authority over the other.
Hmm.
And it's really fun to explore each one
Hmm.
and how they change
And I think
and
it's
what's
just
the
fun
right way.
too, like just the symbolism of everything. Like I know it's not really the yin and yang, but with the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai and then like the dragon's fang and how that it's literally yin and yang.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's just
yin and
like
yang.
that's you describing that, like how the world is in harmony, but not like that just that symbolism, I think just kind of embodies the entire wheel of time.
Yeah, and you see all the problems with the entire world and all these different cultures that men and women are not every single one of them has problems. They're not in harmony,
Hmm.
but they sort of work together. It's just always something's just always a little wrong, that
Hmm.
they're always in conflict and friction rather than what they should be is, working together
Hmm.
and there's a more harmonious relationship that can be had.
Hmm.
And that's a really nice message to go forward with. And something we probably need around a little bit more today of, hey, men and women are not enemies. You're not
I
competing
agree.
against each other.
I agree.
We're here to work together.
Hmm.
And it's stupid to, I don't know, stupid to constantly, you kind of put in your echo chamber of all the male characters and female characters in the series.
Hmm.
You get to, and they start talking to like, ugh, women.
I know.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
just you can't understand them. They're insane.
Yeah.
They're nonsense.
Yeah.
And then you see the women and go like, ah, men are just so stupid. They're idiots. So,
Yeah.
and thing is, you see that today. You go on,
Yeah.
try and go
Yeah.
like YouTube red pill content. You're just like, oh Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing is, and you had the exact same thing of like, yeah, and again, YouTube being more of a male space, but you see it of
Mhm.
like women just kind of like, oh, all men are the same, and they just need it. Ugh, God.
Yeah. You just haven't met the right one yet.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing is, people have a hard time looking outside of their own worldview, and
Mhm.
if someone doesn't think like you, that must be wrong.
Mhm.
And men and women do think differently.
Right.
It, we have
Just
different
psychologically.
brains.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see the world differently. That doesn't mean either side is particularly wrong. And more to the case, both both are necessary to operate in the world.
Mhm.
Of you need a woman's point of view to
Mhm.
see different things. You need a man's point of view to see others, and
Yeah.
when they come together, it's a beautiful thing, and
Mhm.
that's I think the message of the Wheel of Time. And I
Yeah.
like how it's introduced here, and I'm excited to going forward.
Me too. So, well, I appreciate you, Richard.
Yeah.
Don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Richard over at 2toRamble. And for all you ramblers who aren't on his Patreon, I got to throw that in there. Go
Oh,
join the
thank
man's
you.
Patreon. I think it's just become a
Hey,
meme at this point. Someone in the comments is
yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, like Daniel just got to throw in the the Patreon. I just got to do it."
Hey, and if you're not, you gotta subscribe to Diggerdan here
Yeah,
for especially more Wheel of Time reviews, but
yeah.
there's also other reviews.
There-
Gotta catch Daniel's other stuff here.
Yeah, I just got to read more. Is really what it is. So, all right, I appreciate your time, Richard.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Alright.
bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.